Right. Good morning, everybody. Looks like we have a full house for now in terms of participants joining the webinar. I'm Leo May. I'll be moderating today's session and webinar on new strategies for digital everything future, optimizing business efficiency with edge computing. We're excited to have all of you here with us, and I'm sure you're going to find the session very valuable. Just to start out, I thought it would be good to have some discussion on what a digital everything future might look like. You know, where technology is going, and often we're surprised by what technology brings. But in a way, many aspects of technology is much more predictable than what we often think, and that's because the very nature of technology is governed by laws. You know, the laws of physics, chemistry, wires and switches, electrons, and this allows us to predict some trends. You know, and Kevin Kelly, the founder of Wired magazine and a thought leader around digital culture, relates this to gravity. You know, I'm sitting in Cape Town, South Africa at the moment, and we're having fabulous rain. You know, so just imagine raindrops and it's falling in a valley. You know, the actual path of that raindrop as it goes down the valley is very unpredictable. You know, we cannot see where it's going, but the general direction is very inevitable, and it's downward. And so the laws that govern technologies and technological systems give us a sense of where things are going at large. Now, for example, telephones, it was inevitable, but the iPhone wasn't. And the internet, well, that was inevitable, but Facebook was not. And one such trend or leaning, um, I would say, is to make things smarter and smarter. You know, cognification, we talk about artificial intelligence or AI. Now, I work with AI every day through the work I do with MIT Sloan, and I interact with hundreds of decision makers from across the globe every year. And AI, in my opinion, is going to be one of the most influential trends to drive our society in the next couple of decades. I mean, we're already seeing it around us. We've got recommendation engines like Netflix, Amazon. You've got Tinder basically changing the social fabric of society. We've got Facebook, we've got fake news, etc. And these things are changing the way that we interact and that society functions. So there are three elements to cognification or AI that I think is important to take note of. Now, the first one is aimed at our understanding and the way we tend to think about intelligence, and it's very single-minded, a single dimension. Like, for example, IQ, and that's not what intelligence is. So, intelligence, in terms of how we should think about it, is more like a symphony of cognification. You know, and so there are many kinds of intelligence. For example, a squirrel, you know, has a long-term memory that is much, much better than ours, remembering where they buried that acorn. And similarly, we're going to make machines that we're going to engineer in the same way, and we're going to make some of these types of smartness much greater than ours, and many of them won't be anywhere near ours because it's not needed. And so there's going to be a lot of narrow AI. And what we're doing, in a way, is making alien intelligences, and you might even think of this as a sort of artificial intelligence aliens in some senses, but they're going to help us think different. And because we're going to think different, that engine of creation is going to start, and it's going to be an engine of creating wealth and a new economy. So that's why it's important, because economically, we're going to start thinking differently. The second aspect in terms of AI is, and I think that's a very important point for me, is that it's creating a second industrial revolution. So the first industrial revolution was based on that we invented something that we can maybe refer to as artificial power. And before that, we had the agricultural revolution. But now everything that was made by human muscle and animal power, we now started making that through this artificial power. You know, so because we could distribute electricity, we could now take the manual pump and we created an electric pump. You know, so this innovation, this artificial power, created a source of innovation as well. And it drives new businesses, economies, industries, etc. So we're going down the same road, I think, with AI. And we're going to potentially distribute cognition the same way on a grid, where it's getting commoditized, it's becoming a utility. You're already seeing it with services like AWS, Azure, etc. And we're going to take that electric pump and we're going to add some artificial intelligence. So ultimately, we're going to, everything that we electrified, we're going to cognify. So that's going to create a new source of innovation. And then the third element, I think, is around robots and how AI is going to get embodied within robots. But it's not going to take our jobs. It's going to do many of the things that we're doing. But at the same time, it's going to create a bunch of new tasks. And they're going to redefine the way we do our jobs. And they're going to do some of those tasks, but they're also going to create whole new categories. Just as automation made a whole new bunch of things that we didn't know we needed before there was automation. And now we can't live without them. And again, that is going to create new opportunities for innovation, industries, etc. So in terms of the future, where does it take us? I think it's very important. One of those elements is around edge computing, the topic of today, which creates new and improved ways for industrial and enterprise level businesses to maximize the operational efficiency, improve performance and safety, etc., and bring these services and new innovations that's going to become core to how we live and do and work closer to us, and always on availability, which is going to be crucial. But I want to introduce you to, or rather let the experts on this subject introduce themselves. And it's Peter van der Merwe, Jonathan Duncan, and Andre Hamman. And I'm just going to hand over to them and let them introduce themselves to you. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Leo. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. I hope we're going to answer your questions with regards to our theme and the digital everything future. I'm Peter van der Merwe. I'm the regional manager for Stratus for English-speaking Africa and the Middle East. So I'm responsible for the Stratus business in that territory. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Peter. So I'm Jonathan Duncan. I'm leading the secure power team of Schneider Electric for English-speaking Africa. As this sort of division within Schneider Electric, we are responsible for the data center technologies and associated edge data centers. So yeah, it's a very big growing market and a challenge facing many entities today. So I'll hand over to you, Andre.
Andre, you okay.
Thank you. It's Andre Hamman. I'm at the CIO of the entity group, Motor Group, which looks after 40 motor dealerships, and we are in also in relationship with Stratus. We are using their technology, running all our applications, and also the mobility of that, connecting to that. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Andre. Appreciate that. Thanks, gentlemen. So I think on the topic of digital everything, on edge computing, digital transformation is really one of those hot topics at the moment. It's kind of like this holy grail. Why and how do you guys see, edge architects shaping the growth with regards to digital transformation?
Okay, I'll take that. I'll start off and then Jonathan can follow after me. Leo, I believe the journey for digital transformation starts with digitization. You have to get all your data in a digital format. That's step number one. Once you've managed to digitize all your data, obviously you need to protect that data. And that's where the availability comes in. So protecting that asset, your data. And then obviously follow on to that is where you turn that data into information, which will assist the company in planning, in better efficiencies, as we will learn later from Andre. And once you have your data and it's protected, you can then distribute it to either the cloud or the data center. But most of the data is generated at the edge. So outside the data center, in a retail shop, or if it's a manufacturing plant, at the plant, or a very remote place where you don't have all the luxuries of the data center. And that's where we're going to focus on today, is to protect the data out there at the edge. Jonathan, if you want to continue maybe from your side.
Yeah, thank you. So if you look at the big sort of innovations and the drivers of efficiency, it's primarily we're looking at how we do things smarter. Typically, this doesn't necessarily mean ourselves being smarter. It means the devices that we are looking at in field to give us more information that's pertinent to how we'll be able to measure and optimize our operations. A lot of historical practices or agriculture, for example, was pretty non-technical. It was down to the rain, weather, forecasting, etc. But today you got irrigation systems that are automated. They're running off sensors planted in fields. So basically, it's these intelligent devices, or we're taking intelligence, imposing that onto these connected devices in applications, industries, businesses, at what we define as the edge, or where you're having the contact between, let's say, the physical and to, translating it to the data. When we start looking at edge computers, we see this, or edge computing, I should say, we see this drive to reduce the latency. In other words, we have a lot of applications where the data amount or volume of data is massive. We end up needing to do some very fast computations at that perimeter, because we need to make a very fast decision to correct let's say, the projection of the product. In so doing, we've taken that compute now to the edge, where these sensors are generating this information, and it's all primarily to overcome latency, security as a key one as well. You're building your firewalls, because of course every connected device that is addressable on an internet or through Bluetooth, Zigbee, or whatever, could potentially become a point of ingress for malware to get into your system and actually do something harmful to your whole network. So this is where that edge compute sort of comes in and plays a layer of, let's differentiate what's essential information, cascade it up to maybe other systems, storage systems, filter out what's pertinent, what's not changing, and make smart decisions at that edge, fast and quick, cutting down that latency. I mean, we start talking about these driverless vehicles. You can imagine the kind of response time and not how quick those systems need to accumulate lots of information, decide what's the right thing to do, accelerate, stop, brake, turn, this, that, and all of this is happening in the blink of an eye, faster than what we could even compute. So that's going to definitely drive what we call this, or define as these edge compute nodes. An edge could be in the form of a small, like a localized, hardened little data center size of a cupboard, or it could go to these massive sort of 400 or 500 racks in a location where today there's historically no or slow access to cloud or no real resident data center. So it's a diverse sort of explanation on what is edge itself, but just a quick break on it. Peter, I'll go revert to Leo.
No, thanks, Jonathan. I think that gives everybody a nice understanding, some background on what edge computing is, applications, developments in the space. And I think it'll be interesting just to see, given that background, what the audience, where they're at in terms of their understanding at the start of this webinar, having some background now. And maybe if we can just put up a poll to get some input, and if yeah, just get an understanding of, in terms of this digital journey, where everybody is at. That'll be great. So you touched on some applications just now, Jonathan. In terms of opportunities, challenges for edge computing, what do you see currently in the market, in the industry?
Yeah, so I think the key challenge always on edge computing and the driver for it is all around the latency and how fast we can accumulate that information from the various sensors or devices that we're monitoring, interpret that data, and then drive an actionable sort of insight from it as to what we do next. So that's the key driver on it. If you look at technologies, I mean, 20 years ago, fiber optic was pretty exotic. Today, it's fiber to home, it's fiber everywhere. What will be the next innovation in the transmission of data? I'm not sure. And we tend to see this historical tale of centralized servers, then spread to client servers or branch office servers, and now back to centralized. Now we're sort of going decentralized again, as in the case of edge data centers, primarily because we are driving or generating more and more information. The amount of smart devices that we see are installed in field today are massive. The volume of information coming from it is massive. If we try and transfer that all across, let's say even fiber optic, into the central cloud, process, send the response back to our device to make a correction or do an adjustment, it may already be too late. So this is where we see the big driver pushing for these edge nodes. So the challenge is, of course, you're now taking sensitive IT equipment, and you tend to be required to put it into the field, into what was typically maybe an industrial environment. And that's probably the biggest challenge, is how you put this more sensitive equipment into those environments that are not really conducive or healthy for that kind of IT equipment. And there's probably your biggest challenge.
Okay, yeah, if I can maybe add on two things to what you've just said, Jonathan. I 100% agree. Latency is the make or break reason, but also bandwidth, because the cost of bandwidth, if you need an extremely fat pipe to have enough bandwidth to get to the cloud and push all your data to the cloud before you can process it, it costs a lot more for that bandwidth. So bandwidth is the second thing I would like to add. And then the third thing is obviously availability, because if everything is in a digital format and your computer is not working, your business comes to a grinding halt. So, and the more links you have, the greater the risk for availability. So if everything lives in the cloud, first of all, you don't get the response times as a result of latency. Secondly, it's costly, the bandwidth. But thirdly, if that link goes down, your business are not running. And so availability at the edge means that you can still operate your business even if you lose a link for a while. And then the other thing I want to highlight here is, and I think you touched on it, Jonathan, is the fact that we now put compute devices out at the edge where you don't necessarily have IT skills. So the skill out there is lacking. And as a result of that, one of the challenges that we tried to overcome was to design a solution that is extremely simple, and it protects the application or the business, and it runs autonomously. So I'll come back to those three things, but I think that was the main objective when we designed our edge devices. Back to
And I
you,
think
Leo.
that's very important in a context like Africa, where connectivity, be it from internet to just keeping your service up and running, sometimes in electricity and other infrastructure can be a challenge. Andre's here as well. You guys have worked with NTT, making it practical, implementing it in an environment like Africa. It'll be great to hear a bit about those practicalities, challenges, etc., and keeping the operators running.
Yeah, I must say it is a big challenge, and especially in bigger countries up in Africa. That's even getting even more challenging. But even in South Africa, but what we did is we installed two separate lines from two separate sources, so that you hopefully at least one go down on one while the other one is still operating.
Yes, if I can maybe add something there on the NTT side, Andre, is the importance of the digital format and digitization within your business. The fact that you don't fall back on paper anymore. Everything within the business is based on digital, and you designed and planned to protect your data in that digital format. Do you want to mention one or two things?
Yeah, so basically what we do is that each guy, technician, whatever, service advisor, or even a driver of the parts get a tablet, which then obviously the invoices and stuff get loaded from the server onto that on the mobility. Wherever he drives, you can sign on that piece of equipment when you receive your goods at say the panel meter or so. And even if it's not in in an area where you've got connectivity, you can still sign it. And once it reconnects with the network, it uploads it automatically into the server, and then gets stored digitally. So that's much easier to retrieve orders from the manufacturing places, and you don't lose any of your invoices which was signed, and the customer can then also retrieve these invoices from our server.
Thanks, Andre.
Yeah, I think, Andre, that's raises a key thing, is auditing and keeping track of what has been done. And I think that's typically kind of human error accounts for most of the failures that we see in data centers. So yeah, if you can remove the human element as much as possible, keep those automated tracking processes in operation, it just makes life a lot easier. There's always the brain drain when someone retires from an organization. They take with them usually a lot of insight as to what they did in the past and where they put this or where they used to store this information. Whereas if it's all centralized and running through a sort of a digital system, it's going to be in the system in any case. It's a lot easier for continuity of business as we move from one thing to another, even disaster recovery as well.
Yeah. Now the thing is, it does use a little bit of space. I mean, but there is ways to crop and compress and all that type of things to keep space or disk space to a limit. But yeah, I mean, it makes life just so much easier.
Yep.
And when you guys embarked on this journey, what were the concerns that you had, Andrea? We had the poll earlier, and the majority of the participants on the webinar, they're just investigating. They're just at the start of their digital journey, the digital transformation journey. When you started, what were those, concerns, worries that you had around the migration or challenges, etc.?
Well, obviously, you know, if you do get like a server crash or something like that, you've got a problem, you know, retrieving all that stuff again. But again, we are running in two different data centers. So we've got a total duplicate of what servers we've got on the one side, and then in a different location of a data center. So everything are getting duplicated and replicated every day. So what happens on the one side happens on the other side. But yeah, the thing is that the main concern is to get rid of paper, because people throw away papers. Then they keep on coming back and say, yeah, and then especially audits. You know, they come after, then they want 5 years back audits or 6 years or 7 years back audits, where you go and start looking for that paperwork. Now it's just much easier. All the older stuff, we also, some of the stuff we imported so that we can get further, you know, back for the invoices and stuff, which makes the life much easier. And I think that was the main concern, to, you know, get rid of the paperwork, put it onto digital, and get the people as a human factor out of the way for losing stuff, throwing away, saying that, you know, they haven't received it, or no, they haven't signed it. You know, even when you check in a vehicle with us, you sign your job card. So there's no paper job cards anymore. Everything gets done on the tablet itself. So if the technician haven't got a paper job card anymore, he's got his own device. So he fills in on that job card what he's done on that vehicle. And that gets pulled through, and then the lady in the front, the service advisor, can immediately see what's been done, or you can email. So you can manage the time much better than with guys because now you can see that the guys are really are more productive.
Sounds awesome. Peter, you took this journey with Andre and NTT as Stratus. How, you know, what do you consider the best practices for engaging on such a digital transformation journey?
Yes, Leo. So obviously, as I mentioned earlier, once you've managed to digitize all your data, then you can really make your asset work for the business, especially if you turn it into information. But it's a double-edged sword, because on the other hand, as Andre mentioned, if you lose data or you lose your system, then your whole business is impacted. And that's why when we designed the system for NTT, first of all, we went with fault-tolerant hardware so that a single component failure won't impact their business. And then from a disaster recovery, because that's from a compliance point of view, if a whole data center goes down or comms to a data center goes down, they can actually run out of the other data center. So I think step number one is to understand the business properly. And in NTT's case, the integration that happens between the applications, I took quite a while to get my head around that. And it's still changing as they evolve. So the interdependencies and everything. So you have to understand the business to do the proper design. And then obviously you have to protect your asset. And my philosophy is you protect it in every way you can. So fault tolerance, disaster recovery, or business continuity, whichever the business requires.
Anything you'd like to add from your side, Andre, in terms of your experience? That's the absolute must for embarking on such a journey, you know, from a best practice perspective.
Yeah, well, it's like Peter said, you know, the design of the whole thing unfortunately changed from time to time, because you on one road, you think that's the right road, which we follow, and then as you go along, you see that if you must rather change the road to another direction because there's more stuff that you want to add, or a total different way that you want to implement whatever changes you want to make. So it's a continuous journey, which I don't think will stop because there's so much things that can actually be automated via this and make life easier for everybody.
Yeah, if I maybe can just give a bit of background. When we met, Andre, you were running physical servers on each application on its own physical server. And I can recall I visited you during a month-end period where some of the servers just couldn't cope anymore. And that's where we designed this this virtualized elastic environment so that we can actually accommodate these changes on the fly. And we've come a long way in the last 6 years.
Yes.
So something I've definitely heard is redundancy, critical, but also agile, agility, agile. So it's one thing having an agile architecture. That's the easy part. From an organizational perspective, from a cultural perspective, how did you find that agility in terms of the implementation and bringing that into the way that the business think and work, etc.? Because that's ultimately what digital transformation is also about, changing the culture of the business.
Not easy, because a lot of people resist. Some of them, for, I will say, at least 6 months, they actually ran a double system. So they kept on with the job cards and they started with the digital side of that because they didn't trust it. So that was, but then eventually what we did then is to force some mandatory fields that if you haven't finished that, you can't carry on. So that actually forced the people to start using that, which then at the end, now if you want to tell them, please, we need to go back to the job card system, the normal Android system, paper system, nobody wants to, because it's so easier and so nice to have the digital side of it.
So we started touching on in terms of how organizations adopting these new technologies. We spoke about NTT now. Thanks for sharing some of those experiences, Andre. Peter, Jonathan, you guys obviously, you're in the field in terms of, in more general, in terms of organizations and the adoption.
If Jonathan, if I may go first, and then I'll pass over to you. One of our biggest customers in South Africa is Dis-Chem, and each Dis-Chem pharmacy is also running on a fault-tolerant server. And originally, it was purely from a availability standpoint. But then as they evolved, they realized also that they can switch their PABX onto a VoIP system, which just becomes another appliance on this platform. And as this platform is an availability solution, everything is just protected. So I think once you understand the business requirements and you have to take the first step and get everything in the digital format. Then you realize, but there's another benefit you can realize by just adding another virtual machine or appliance into your environment. And I think that's the important thing, is you need to do planning, but you have to take the first step. Otherwise, you're going nowhere.
Well said, Peter. Just in terms of, Schneider Electric, one of our drives is to digitize everything. All of our products are small circuit breakers, give them intelligence. Now, the reason for that is as we are deploying more and more of these devices and recording or retrieving data from these devices, we start to, from that pool of information, we're able to start doing analytics and predictive analytics. More importantly, when do we need to look at upgrading a breaker, for example? When do we need to look at replacing a breaker? And that, I think, is the true benefit of going digital everything, is that data becomes a gold mine. Once you start to analyze that data, it's there, it's stored, and over a couple of years, you're able to draw trends, analysis going through it. And that's where NTT, I'm sure, is headed, is, what spares are high runners, what spares are low runners, what do they need? They can more optimize their supply chain, more optimize the efficiency of technicians doing the actual service activities. And this is something which Schneider's really heavily focused on. And I don't want to go into a sales pitch here, but just the core or the key message is, if you've got that information, from that information, you can start to draw analytics on it. If you bring in AIs and let the artificial intelligence disseminate, run through it, they will start to pick up trends. And from those trends, you can really drive efficiency in your organization, be it supply chain, be it optimized spares, holding, etc., etc. It's just that data is a gold mine.
Yeah, it's a snowball effect. Yeah. Sorry, Leo.
No, please, Peter. Now, I was just listening to Jonathan talk about in a couple of years. And I think that's one of the big differences. Part of the digital journey is that the organization needs to understand that gold mine, it takes a while to get, to the gold at the bottom. It's not an immediate thing. You can't think in quarters. I often say to clients, when's the best time to plant a tree? It was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And the same is with data. That's part of that mind shift challenge, to unlock these things, and the journey and the mindset about a long-term view. So, and how do you find that in terms of, do organizations really grasp that it's a journey that's not going to be immediate return on investment, and that the ROI grows exponentially over time?
If I may come in here, Leo, quickly, I sometimes get questioned by people who resist change, and especially when you talk about digital transformation. And I had such a conversation with a really difficult person close to retirement. And in the end, I thought, and I asked him, may I have a look at your phone? And as he pulled his phone out of his pocket, he had a smartphone. And I said, but why do you have a smartphone, not a Nokia 2110? And he says, because I need it. And then I used that, because there's no ways you can browse the internet with a Nokia 2110. And immediately that guy got it. He realized that in the same fashion as not using a 20-year-old cell phone who can't browse the internet, you can't do that to your business. So sometimes you have to do something drastic to get the message across.
So I think a lot of businesses are at that place. It'll be interesting to hear from the participants. If you can maybe just, we've got another poll in terms of, do they feel vulnerabilities in terms of digitization, not necessarily having started it? What are the challenges, etc.? Being uncertain. It'll be great to have some view on what the participants feel currently in terms of their businesses, their organizations. So while we're busy with that poll, I think we covered some of it. Most of the things, I see there was one question from the participants. It was Ashley Govender. He just wanted to know in terms of the use of on-site versus external servers to store the data. Obviously, Edge is about being on-site, but at the same time, we were talking about redundancies, more than one data center, etc. What are your opinion around that? It's asking about the best data warehouses and protecting data. So I think we touched it, but maybe if you can just put it all together again, Peter.
I'll elaborate. So just getting back to depending on your business, but in most cases, the data gets generated at the edge via sensors, or it might be a retail shop counting the number of people getting into the store. But that's where we generate the data. And the whole thing is that data is important. But to answer your question is, what we would like to do is convert that data into information at the point where it's generated. And that's the edge, the plant, the retail store in Soekmekaar, or whatever the case might be. And once you've turned that data into information, that's the point where you want to send that to a central repository, like a data warehouse, or into the cloud, or your data center, which means is you only send a small portion of all the data you've generated up into the cloud or to the data center. I hope I answered the question with that explanation.
Sounds good to me, Peter. On another point, Jonathan, you touched on the devices, AI, getting the data, having the sensors, etc. I think, Andre, that feeds into predictive maintenance, which is obviously a big thing at the moment. Lots of organizations kind of taking their first steps around AI, predictive capabilities, etc. in that space. The world has changed. Remote work is a reality now. And you need to keep your operations online with your smaller crews. Is predictive maintenance and the data, etc. Is that something that you're leveraging at the moment? Are you planning to leverage that based on these capabilities?
We are doing it. Constantly, because we've been running onto there's different programs and stuff that you can use to do the maintenance remotely from a central site, which then make it easier once the units get started up or the guy get locked in. The latest update of that existing, the newer program or something, will upload and then install and carry on from there. So that maintenance side it's there, but it's not that I would say difficult or very time consuming, because you must just make sure sometimes something do happen, you have to go back and then either reinstall or do something with that. But other from that, there's you must make sure you've got antiviruses running on those devices, because that is your main thing, because of the mobile networks and stuff, or if they are on your Wi-Fi network that's in your dealership.
So you're touching on some challenges there. Yes, sorry, Peter.
Yes, if I may add there, you spoke about predictive maintenance, but if we could add predictive failure, because if we know something is going to fail, we can avoid that failure. And that's, I think, the key. And that's part of the design we did, is we can predict failure very, very accurately. And because we have fault-tolerant devices, when you can predict failure, you move the business away from that component that's going to fail, and without impact to the business. So that's also key. And then obviously it just increases the efficiency once again, because if you, like one CIO said, the one thing he doesn't want to get is a surprise, especially 2 o'clock in the morning. So if you can avoid any surprises, that's where you protect your business. And if I may, again, just add the 3 things that I believe is absolutely key, is simplicity, because of skills, protected. You need to protect the application or the business and it needs to run autonomously. And I think this is where the key comes in, that autonomous, where the device can predict failure or warns you that something is going to go wrong, and you can take action before it actually impacts the business. That's our motto. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. Very, very important point. That's ultimately what it's about, keeping uptime. But
yeah.
So within the context of South Africa and the wider Africa, potentially a nice proxy for other developing economies, what are the challenges of implementing edge computing? We did touch on it earlier, but what was the main things that stood out for you in the environment? Maybe Andre, you can go, having done it, and then any other input.
Yeah, I must say, especially happen is that we are in more remote areas, which are not covered by all the necessary suppliers that they can use for your mobile devices and stuff. So that is quite a big challenge to get connectivity, throughout. Because, like Peter previously said, right, drive to supercar and you deliver a vehicle, but there's no signal that you can use. So you have to then use your device and then get back, and then only upload the stuff, because you can't do it while you're busy with the client at that specific, because there's no signal. So that is a big challenge. And then obviously in Africa, it's a bigger problem, because you rely on all the necessary suppliers there, which is not really 100% up to standard that we are used to.
Yep. If I may add something here, and this is where the relationship with Schneider is so important. We build systems that stay up, but for that to happen, we need a partner like Schneider. And if I may talk on NTT's behalf here, Andre, you are a customer of Schneider as well, because the UPSs you use in your dealerships have obviously come from Schneider. So protecting everywhere you can, your environment, the power, and then obviously the data. And I'm sure Jonathan can add a couple of things here as well.
Yeah, if you look at some of the bigger challenges, is as you go for this distributed IT across all of your many shop floors or working environments, depending on which industry you're in, it's making sure or keeping track on the on the status of that equipment. So therefore, connecting back, monitoring how many, like Nigeria, for example, we have multiple power failures in a day, and that regular cycling on certain battery types will deplete them very fast. And so the life expectancy there varies versus, let's say, what's in a more stable, like European environment. So it's this diversity of environments that you need to ideally be in touch with your equipment. So by that, I'm talking about a sort of surveillance, not so much a surveillance, but a monitoring platform that sits on top of your network that can look at your physical devices and say, hey, this environment's good, or hey, this guy's been working in 45-degree temperatures. Preemptively, this thing is going to fail quite quickly. And that's probably a key thing, is the monitoring. The other one is, of course, security. We're taking pretty expensive, valuable equipment, tablets, putting them in the hands of technicians. They leave it on top of a toolbox or on a production line, for example. And it's keeping track of where those things are and how well maintained they are. They're looked after. And then just environments, and securing it, locking it down so that they can't be, let's say, just picked up and carried off, in particular the server that's accumulating or simulating all that information that's generated.
So thanks for that, Jonathan. I think you touched on it earlier, Peter, when you spoke about Discam. Edge computing in a retail environment, some case studies that you can bring to the table on that, and the benefits for
okay.
retailers.
So actually, we have a video customer reference or a customer case study on our website. So the participants can easily just go and Google Stratus and Dischem and look at the video. But the bottom line is that the CIO said that they had zero downtime, and that was one of the big advantages, but also the simplicity of the system, and obviously the monitoring, the fact that we know something is going to go wrong before it does. That's very important. We also have other retail customers. Some I can't mention, but in most cases, it starts off with the transaction processing, because it's the money flowing that's protected. And then as they get comfortable, they start protecting emails, they start protecting their stock holding application. And then VoIP is another app that naturally migrates across onto the digital world as part of this transformation journey.
Excellent. Yeah. So on that transformation journey, Andre, NTT, when you think 2021 and beyond, and at this stage, it's kind of difficult to look past the current month. It's kind of feeling like we're still stuck in 2020. But how do you see edge computing as an area of potential in terms of NTT's digital transformation strategy?
Well, like I said, we are constantly, busy driving it. So we are putting more and more of stuff onto the digital side, which were previously not possible. I mean, counting of vehicles that's in the stockyard, like for example, that you know exactly how many new vehicles you've got. They marked, they labeled. You can scan them with the scanner. You know exactly what vehicle it is, everything, which then obviously get also pulled back to our application data, which then make it much easier for everybody to go and have a look and see what stock are in each dealership. So I think there's a lot of planning at the moment. We are busy with 2 other projects that we are busy going to convert onto digital for further on in this year, and hopefully by June, July, we will start implementing one of them as a trial with 1 or 2 dealerships, and then carry on from there.
But what I hear from you is that it's become a lot easier to add new capabilities, to digitize new things, where in the beginning it was a massive implementation to get some basics in place, but now adding is you can easily pivot, you can run experiments, etc.
Yeah, no, definitely, because all the integration, that I think, and that was quite a headache to get all that integrations written and linked into the current application, because some of the applications are still very old, so you don't have the luxury of the newer applications, the programs that are available at the moment. So you have to adapt to that. But once that's been done, that makes life much easier when to alter something and get that onto the new platform.
And as the culture evolves, the people are more keen to participate in this change, because they see the benefit, they experience it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely definitely a, like you said, a mind change that needs to happen. But once the mind change have happened, then you can't hold them back. It's like a July horse that's running in July. They just want to run.
It sounds like you let the genie out of the bottle.
Yeah.
So you were talking about, Peter, you spoke about the architecture, the design. Now you're talking about integration. is that, what are all the elements that's involved in edge computing, implementing something like this, and how, who does what? How do you guys get involved? How do you assist?
I think there's no single answer for that question, Leo, unfortunately, but it all depends on the type of business and the relationship. The tighter the relationship and the better the communication between the supplier and the end user, the better the solution. And somewhere you have to go through a learning curve, and there will be teething problems along the way, but don't let that stop you. It becomes knowledge and experience once you've resolved those challenges. And we had a couple of those as well along the way.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so I think we've just about run out of time. I want to thank everybody that participated in the webinar. It was, I think it was a very fruitful exercise. I really enjoyed getting some practical insight from all of you. I think it's for everybody, participants, if you want to find out more about some of the speakers, the panelists, they're all on LinkedIn. Yeah, you can find the company profiles, etc. there. I invite you to follow them. Yeah, I'll also be sharing some of this information from my side. Yeah. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, Leo. Much appreciated. Jonathan, thank you. And Andre, thank you very much. And to all our participants.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.
Have a nice day. Go well. Bye.
Bye.